Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Newell. I have the privilege of serving as pastor at First Baptist Church of Glenville, Georgia. Today, I'd love for us to spend just a few moments talking through a discipleship plan over the next year for teenagers within our church. This will include talking about the biblical rationale for discipleship. This will include talking about development and discipleship knowledge, which includes social development, cognitive development, even faith development. And then we'll also talk through the curriculum we'll be using, which will be Explore the Bible. And we'll talk about how that will factor in on Sundays and on Wednesdays and what that looks like throughout the student ministry, as well as the resources needed. How many people do we need to make this happen? How much money do we need to make this happen? What space do we need to make this happen? So over the next few minutes, I'd love your attention as we talk through a discipleship plan for our teenagers. The first question we have to ask ourselves is, what is discipleship? I'd like us to take a biblical approach to this. For example, Hebrews chapter 6 verse 1 says, "Therefore, let us leave the elementary teaching about Christ and go on to maturity." Colossians 2 verses 6 through 7 say, "So then, just as you have received Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to walk in him, being rooted and built up in him and established in the faith, just as you were taught, and overflowing with gratitude." You see, the preteen and teenage years are pivotal as these young men and women begin owning their faith. It transitions from being their parents' faith or their guardian's faith into their own. While looking at the cognitive development of teenagers, they fall within the category of formal operational. At this stage in development, children are much more focused on possibilities. They are able to think in abstract ways and test abstract thinking. So we need to remember that their thinking is not concrete. It's not just black and white. It's not just so simple as yes or no. But when we are discipling them in these teenage years, they simply have what I would like to call wet concrete. It's moldable, it's formable, it's not always the easiest to move around, but it's by no means settled. And so we have the opportunity, cognitively speaking, to develop and mold these teenagers, much like God molded the clay in the story of Jeremiah with the potter and the clay. When we begin talking about teenage development from a psychosocial standpoint, teenagers are typically categorized as identity versus role confusion. What exactly does this mean? Well, this means that teenagers work at developing a sense of self by testing roles and then integrating them to form a single identity. For example, some expressions of identity are certainty about sex role, active interest in the opposite sex, plans for the future, challenging adult authority. Does that sound familiar? And tending to be self-accepting. Some expressions, though, of identity confusion are doubts about the sex role, lacking confidence, being overly hostile toward authority, being overly obedient. I bet we've never really thought about it that way. And there tends to be a self-rejection that happens. Now, I know at this point you're probably thinking to yourself, Brandon, why are you talking so much about the cognitive and social development of teenagers? I mean, we just want to teach them the Bible and move on. But we have to remember that all of these things factor into how we can best disciple a teenager. When we're talking about the development of their faith, teenagers fall under the category of synthetic conventional. And here's essentially what this means. It's that teenagers tend to rely on an institution, such as a church, to give them stability. They become attached to their forms of their religion and get extremely upset when these are called into question. For example, the difference in denominations may be upsetting. While many people move into the synthetic conventional stage in their teenage years, what we actually find is that many people actually stay here. And so what we don't want to happen is for our teenagers to develop naturally in their faith to this stage, but then stay there. See, discipleship is about moving to the next stage of discipleship, not about staying exactly where you are the whole time. You can see from December to May, we are covering the book of Genesis. This is all through the Explore the Bible curriculum. Everything that is Sunday school is Explore the Bible. In fact, the entire church is going to be using Explore the Bible so that from children to senior adults, every group in between is using the same material, studying the same overall passages, and being able to communicate those together as a family and as a church family. You see, after Genesis in June, we move into Acts all the way through October. This also goes hand in hand with what we are covering on Sunday morning during the primary worship service. We are preaching through Genesis and then Acts, and it will be a holistic approach to these books of the Bible. And then you can see in November, we would start with Exodus and Leviticus. I did not move it past this because we are just considering over the next year. And then you see on Wednesday night, it's a little bit different of approach. And so here's kind of the overall idea behind Wednesday nights. We'll alternate between a book study and a topical series, and the book studies will alternate between New and Old Testament. So how many people do we need to establish this goal? Well, factoring in that we average around 20 students for Sunday school, I estimate that we need about 4 adult leaders, aside from myself, pouring into the lives of these students. On Wednesday nights, we average about 50 students, so we need to account for 10 adult leaders. This is a ratio of 5 students to 1 adult leader, which I just think is a good balance. As far as classrooms, what we would need is we would have our main student room, and that is also where Sunday school will take place. And then as we divide into small groups, both on Sunday mornings and on Wednesday nights, we have a middle school boys small group room, a middle school girls small group room, a high school boys small group room, a high school girls small group room. And in all of this, as we consider our needs, when we talk about Explore the Bible and the different curriculum that comes through that, we need roughly $807.35. As we come to a conclusion, are there any questions you have for me